Hello, everybody. This is Gail Craft from the Empowering Process podcast, and I love to introduce to you today my guest, Cathy Derksen. Cathy is the founder of Tenacity Global Solutions, which is intended to help, support, and inspire midlife women to rediscover their brilliance and step into their new possibilities. Cathy lived a life of toxicity and putting herself last. When she first recognized there was something missing, she took action and intentionally changed her life and walked away from the environment that she was in. Come and listen to this 11-time #1 bestseller on Amazon talk about how she works with women to tell their stories and get their life to a different level. Welcome, Cathy.
You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Craft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Craft.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Gail Craft from the Empowering Process podcast, and I have with me Cathy Derksen. Did I spell that correctly? Say that correctly?
Derksen.
Derksen, that's correct. And she has a company called Inspired Tenacity Global Solutions Inc. We'll get to how that got created in a little bit. But Cathy's going to talk to us about her struggle around not being able to ask for help or ask for permission or ask, right, Cathy?
Well, I'm getting better at the ask, but there's still a challenge with the receiving. There are two completely different pieces.
right. So I have a little story for me. So yes, I was one who thought I'm superwoman, I could do it all, right? I don't need your help, I'll get it done. And I had a friend one time, I just know she offered something, and I said, no, I got it. And she said, Gail, when someone offers to do something for you and you say no, you take the gift away.
Yes.
Whoa. So since that day, I now say thank you.
That was something that shifted my whole perspective on receiving as well. Someone told me that a few years ago also. And yeah, it just kind of puts everything into a different perspective. And then you realize too, yeah, if I offer something to somebody and then they just turn me down and don't want it, then that makes me feel, unwanted, or that my assistance was not appreciated. So
right?
That's definitely helped me. And that is probably one of the one main things that has allowed me to get better at receiving.
So let's talk about growing up and feeling like you have to do it on your own. I'm sure our upbringing was not the same, but I will tell you some of my experiences were things like if I got an A- or B+, it was, well, why isn't it an A? Right? It's not good enough. Right. So that's no matter what, it had to be perfect or it wasn't good enough. So that put me in a position of, striving, even if it was something that was not in my wheelhouse. Right. But I'll tell this story. I've never told this story. So this is interesting, Cathy. I was a gang kid. And this one summer, I was at the local pool. And of course, because the lifeguards are there. Why else would a teenage girl be at the local pool? But apparently, some of the gang girls in that area were jealous that some of the lifeguards liked me. Certainly not the ones that I was after, for sure. Right? and I got wind of they were waiting for me outside the pool. So a couple of the lifeguards said, listen, we'll, wait, we'll close up, we'll drive you home. So I got home safely. And my father's response was, you should have defended yourself
Oh,
against, half a dozen other girls and me. Right?
yes, but
Right?
not a fair fight.
Right. And so the lesson reinforced is you take care of yourself. No matter what the odds are, you take care of yourself. And so I didn't know how to ask for help because I was trained, do it yourself. Right. Suck it up, put your big girl panties on and do it yourself. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing and why you believe that it was your job to carry the world on your shoulders and be Atlas.
Yes, yes. No, I have to say that I think my parents were very good about allowing us to dabble in different things and to excel where we did. And I definitely don't remember any pressure like that
Mm-hmm.
about grades, and maybe that was because I was generally a naturally good student. And but where I think it was for me, we moved a lot when I was a kid. And so every time you move, you're starting over, reestablishing, you're on your own. And I think that's a lot where it started, in that, every time was, you had to do it yourself. You had to stand alone. You had to just keep going, right? And I think as well, obviously that would put a lot of pressure on my mom as well, because she had to move the whole household over and over and over. My dad could go off to work and be busy at work, but my mom was the one that had to, set up everything, get us reestablished in schools, try to make new friends, get things set up. And so, I mean, that's pretty overwhelming for her too, especially with 3 young kids in tow. And I've moved as a grown up as well a few times, and no, it's not fun and it's not easy.
No, it's definitely not. The art of establishing yourself quickly is definitely a skill set. So,
Yes.
so you found yourself, when did you realize that you got lost, that you were lost in the yes, 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 not knowing how to put your lips together and say no?
I think it really wasn't until I was probably in my late 30s or early 40s, even, after being a mom for a decade, and I think that was when it really, really sunk in that, as a mom, you tend to put yourself in, at least I put myself on the back burner. I focused on everybody else. I ran my whole schedule around what everybody else needed. At one point I remember just thinking, I don't even know what I like to eat anymore, or what kind of music I even like to listen to. I think that's when it really hit me. And I realized that. I thought, wow, what music do I even like? I don't even know.
Wow. Yeah. Yes. And so for me, I mean, I think mine was gradual. It wasn't a moment in time. I can remember a boss teaching me to say no. She actually sat
Oh,
me down and
wow.
said, I want you to put your lips together. That's what she said. And say, no, just follow me and mimic me. Come on, you can do it. Um, but the last time was when my big breakthrough, huge breakthrough happened. And I was in Oregon, and I had a roommate, and we were both working at the same place. And I finally said no to the woman who owned the company. That, no, this is not my responsibility and not my fault. I'm not owning this. And my roommate saying to me that night, it's about time you stood up and said
Oh,
no. You have been taking responsibility for things that have not been yours, and I'm getting kind of tired of it. Right. And
yes.
and I was sat there and I went, I wanted so much to make this work that I would take on anything that
Yeah.
wasn't going right. And it's impossible. You cannot run a whole company all by yourself. right? You cannot, and then do what you were brought to do in the first place. And so that was my beginning of my CTJ, come to Jesus conversations with myself. So was there a turning point for you, and what were the things that you saw and that you did to start making changes, and how did that affect your relationships?
Yes. Yeah, I think, when I first realized those things about food and music, and that I could start in a sense that I was disappearing into that role as a mother. But I think it really was, we were in a car accident around 2008, and it was a fatal accident for one of the other people involved. Luckily, my family was okay physically, obviously very traumatic for all of us. But I think that was really the turning point for me, when you really get that big wake up call around, okay, life is too short. We can't just keep just doing life and plodding along and being miserable, and that whole martyr thing of I will do it all, I will carry it all, I'll be all for everyone except myself. And I think that was the big wake up call for me, that life is just too short. I have to make changes no matter what. And that it's going to be hard, and there'll be ups and downs and tears and anger and all the rest of it. But that was for me when I really just dug in my heels and thought, no, I have to make huge changes in my life, and no matter what.
So what were some of the things that you did initially to get yourself going?
I think the first parts that I was doing just kind of around building that understanding and that self-reflection. And I mean, like, you're with your, call to you call it
CTJ,
call.
call to
CJ.
Jesus. Yep. It's come to Jesus,
Come to
actually.
Jesus. Okay. Yeah. To me, luckily I had a few friends that were in the personal development areas, and in breath work and other kinds of things like that. They would really kind of give you more of that inner reflection. And I got started that way, and it really helped me to build clarity around what I needed to do, and I think the strength to do it. And I realized that my marriage was very abusive and toxic. My workplace was also extremely toxic and stressful. And so I came to the conclusion I just needed to start over again, start from scratch. I had two teenagers at the time, and of course they came along with me, but I left the marriage, left the career, and started fresh, and started looking at, okay, what is it that I'm here to bring? What is my thing? And so I at that point, I describe it like I threw my life up in the air and reinvented it on the way back down. It just, that's what it felt like too, just complete chaos, but moving in a direction, kind of like a tornado. It's traveling in a direction, but it's just complete chaos. But
Chaos and swirl is where change happens, because that's like the boiling ground, right? For change to occur, because you're so uncomfortable, you kind of give up the fight and you're open for the change.
yeah, and in a couple of my earlier books, I wrote a lot about that time, and I mentioned a phrase that I had, and I would literally say to myself, chin up, keep moving. So at those times when there was really nothing else to hold on to and nothing else to really see what's in front of you, I literally would say to myself and think to myself, chin up, keep moving. And at times that was the only thing that kept me moving and kept me just on any kind of, I was going to call it a track, but I'm not sure there was a track. So.
Yeah, there's no track, guys. There's no track. There really isn't. That's just a fallacy. There's a direction, but you may have seen the meme that shows that reaching a goal isn't a straight line. It's more like the squiggly thing that goes all over the place, right? And then where you land is not where you thought you were going to land in the first place, and it's perfect. It's perfect. That's why I really focus on just being in the moment, right? Because like you said, tomorrow's not promised. And this is the only thing that's real, is this moment, and make the most of each moment that you can. So, so you make it sound so simple, and it's
Yeah.
not. And it's not. And it's not something that you do alone. I would highly suggest that people hire help. Honestly, find yourself a good coach, a good mentor, a good master, depending on what level that you're at. And whoever you're working with is not the only answer, right? Because as you grow out of those tools, and it's time to find someone else and someone else. That's at least been my experience. Is that I evolved past my teachers into something different, and so I look for something more. Um, and so how did you start this writing? And then we want to get a little bit into what that's all about, but how and why did you start writing to begin with?
And it's interesting the comment you just made about that you don't necessarily know where you're going, but it's the right place. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I was going to be in the publishing industry and have 11 books under my belt, I would have laughed at you. Because at that point there was really it was not on the radar. It was not part of the plan. And I'm actually dyslexic. So
Me
reading,
too. So
spelling,
writing,
all
oh
those
my
things,
God.
those were
Yes.
not things that came naturally to me or that I kind of welcomed into my life as
I
a kid.
cannot write a sentence without three mistakes, and I can't see the mistakes.
Without spell check, I don't know
Right.
where I would be. I
Right.
love spell check.
Yeah.
And so where I started my writing, there's a local group here that had been doing a few books, and I knew about their books, but nothing really called to me that to be in them.
Right. So these
And
are collaborations.
yes,
Okay.
they're all multi-author compilation books, collaboration books. And
Mhm.
but so I'd been aware of their books, but didn't really feel a connection with them. And then one of their books came out, or was being worked on, and it was focused on, what did we call it? Emotional intelligence, mental health matters. And that came right when I was starting to feel like I'd come through all of this tornado and chaos that was my life. So at that point, that title, it just called to me. And it was
Right.
like, I have a story for that book.
Right.
So when I jumped into that one, again, I had no plan on doing more. There was nothing else around marketing myself or building a network. It was just, I have a story that I think will help other women. So I want to share my story in this book. So that's where it all started.
So, so it was a local thing that was happening, that you kind of stayed connected with because you were curious, and then something came up that fit, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you wrote your first chapter, um, and then what happened?
Then COVID came, and the rest of
So
the
we don't
tornado.
want to say the C word, the
No,
great
no.
lockdown.
Yeah.
The great
That's right, the
lockdown.
great lockdown. And at that time, I was working in financial planning. And while the rest of the world was on lockdown and their world got quiet, my life was the opposite. I was working from home. I had over 250 people that depended on me as their first point of contact to do with their mortgages, their investments, their savings, everything. So imagine COVID, sorry, the C word, when markets are crashing, people are losing their jobs, the housing market's crashing, everything to do with money was crashing. And I was sitting at home alone on my phone and the computer with everybody at me, thinking I was going to save them. I was the one with the answers. Well, nobody had any answers at that point. And so the next book that came along with that same group was focused on our experience in the middle of that. And again, I felt like I have a story that's different than the story everybody else is telling. And it used to drive me crazy when people would talk about, oh, we've got nothing to do. Oh, life is so boring. Oh, you must have time for this. It's like, you know what? I'm working triple time, and
And
no.
it's not fun. And it's not fun. No.
No. And so that was the next book I was in. It was focused on our experience in that. And I actually wrote my part comparing what I was in the middle of. Like I was in the middle of like a a hurricane. So I'm literally holding onto a pole while the wind is whipping around me and things are flying by my head, and that people are coming to me with this, save me, save me. I'm like, how do I save them? I
Right.
need to save myself and my family, so that was kind of where I started my story in that book. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it was a theme, the call to me that I have something to say. And so that was
That was
where I
book.
guess it became a habit after that.
It became a habit after this. So book number 2. Um, so so somehow you morphed writing in well, let's call them anthologies or collectives,
Okay. Yeah.
collections, um, into being I wouldn't say the publisher, but you're the
I call
genesis, the
yes,
genesis, right? For
I call
other
myself the
people,
curator.
right? For other people to write, and then you hand off the publishing and so forth.
Yes.
So how did that happen, and what does that look like, and how does that fit into um, your vision of no longer being a doormat, let's say?
Yes, yes. And I think it really was in those first few years. And so it's been 2.5 years since I walked away from my corporate job as well. So that was my second big career change. So back
Yeah.
in 2010, I did that whole throw my life up in the air in, when was that now? 2021. I left that next corporate position of financial planning to start my own business, Inspired Tenacity. And so definitely as I was going through those steps was when I was starting to really identify as a leader and as someone, again, who had something to say that would help other people. And so when I first left my job in financial planning, my idea in my head was that I would do more of like a coaching money kind of thing. But again, I was really listening to my intuition, listening to what is it people are asking of me. And that's where it really kind of, the whole book thing really blossomed, because at that point I was still, once you get into doing some books, then you get invited into different projects, different networks. Your whole network kind of
Ships.
blossoms in all
Yeah.
kinds of different directions.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I had been involved in quite a few books. And I guess it was about a year and a half ago now. So I was doing my business on more of a coaching model. And at that point, I was involved with a couple of different books. And I like to describe so far I've been in with, I think it's 7 different publishing groups I've worked with. So I've come to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and realize that there's some ways that are a wonderful experience and other ways that just not. And at that point, I was in the middle of 2 projects on extreme ends of that. So one was wonderful, fun, smooth, everything was great. And the other one was a complete nightmare that dragged on for a year and a half. No one ever knew what was going on. We didn't even know if it was going to keep going or not. And so in the middle of that, I thought, oh my God, this should be a fun experience. And I realized that that was where I felt I could step in and support women with a platform that creates that smooth, fun, exciting way of doing this.
So
And
let's talk about that
yeah,
for a moment, because it's
yeah,
really,
yeah,
really important. Because many of these books, many of these anthologies are stories that people share, men and women, that's not just women,
yeah, yeah.
um, that are tender still. And
Yes,
so when you have a horrific experience, you can actually send that author into a tailspin, right? And
yes,
so, I do have a concern myself with people who are running these anthology groups, because there are a dime a dozen now, they're everywhere, not having the skill set to help someone emotionally through what
yes,
the breakthroughs that they're going through in writing their stories. Now, we met because I joined an anthology group, and my story, I had done the healing. Right. It was a story. It literally was a story. Like I was writing a book, like I was writing fiction when I was writing it. But I found it very interesting, excuse me, how I chain things together because I worked on each situation individually. And now I was chaining them together and went,
Mm.
huh, no wonder my life was so messed up. Right. Right. Um, most people are not in that emotional EI, emotionally intelligent state. And
Yeah.
so, what are some of the things that you offer to these authors who are, I need to write my story, and then in the middle of it, they're like hitting a wall.
Yes, yes. Well, one of the things that I do, all of my authors, before they jump in, I have a Zoom like this with them where we talk about their story, we talk about what they'd like to share. And that's one of the things I'm looking for. I'm looking for, are they in a place where they're okay about writing this? And there have been a few women that I've talked to, and they thought they were going to be, and then as we got talking about it and they were telling me their story, we realized she's not ready to release this.
Right.
And so in cases like that, we agree with that. And I make sure that she understands that now is not the time for her to be sharing this
Mm-hmm.
in writing to the world. And so I will always support them in looking for people that, like you say, that are their counselors or coaches, and making sure that they know that if they need that help. Sometimes, it's a community that helps and being with others that helps. And so depending on the situation, but
Mm-hmm.
that's something I always do at the beginning. And I'm in touch with my authors all the way through. We have group get-togethers, we have one-on-one chats like this, and just really building on that and looking for that, because yes, I am so aware of that. And even like when I was writing that one about that hurricane that I was in at work with all this stuff, I was in the middle of it and it was raw.
It was raw.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and there was definitely a lot of tears that came
Right.
along with,
Right. And
but
it can be healing and
yes, yes.
cathartic. I will tell you, so I've got, I don't know, 5 or 6 books out. And the very first book that I wrote, I paid a lot of money for support. Air quotes for those who are listening and not watching, right? And thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And every time I would get a proof of the book, the numbers on the pages would be missing, the margins would be off, or it was horrific,
Oh no.
right? And and they're blaming me because I'm like, no, this is not for print. So finally, they were so sick of it that they published my book and shipped me my copies. That first book is out there with no page numbers.
What?
Yes. Yes. Right. And I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Right. And so I shut down from writing because it was a terrible experience. And it's a very important book, but I shut down. And then a few years later, and I mean maybe 4 years later, I was pulled to write what I was going through. And what I was going through was getting myself out of a situation I was in, which is a whole other story, which has nothing to do with this conversation. But I started writing empowering questions. And so the book is 366 empowering questions.
Oh,
That's
cool.
the empowering process, right? That I found these amazing women to help me publish it, edit it, get the cover done. And I went, oh, this is such a different experience,
Yes.
right? Than because I was afraid, right? Right. But it was such a beautiful experience. When I was ready to write again, um, they're no longer in business. And I will tell you that I have found two. You're involved with one, and the other is the person who's doing my current book that's coming out. Um, Beautiful experience. It's the conversation. It's the asking questions to get to know you, right? To be sure that, like, I have a strange way of languaging. And, I was going through edits the other day with the woman I'm working with now, and she says, I know this is how you speak. So, I'm ignoring the corrections. I'm like, good, because that's how I speak. Right.
Yes,
And that I
yes,
would very much intentionally, and every once in a while we would stop at something and I would say, well, what I want to say, and I wouldn't look at the words and I would blurt it out and be exactly what I said. It's like, gotta stay,
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
stay. Right. And so you want to be sure that there is a connection with anyone that you're working
Oh,
with,
definitely,
right?
definitely.
With
Yes,
anyone, right? Whether it's, what is it? The banker, the baker, the candlestick maker, or whatever, whoever they are, if there's not a connection, you don't have to be with them. There's
yes, yes,
more.
yes. There are choices
Right? Which
in
I
all
didn't
directions.
realize, right? So working with you, you do a pre-screening to be sure that people are
Yeah.
ready to tell their story.
Yes.
And so and then you build a community for them,
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and sometimes too, when you know when an author comes to me and they want to be in the book and they want to be sharing their story, and if we find that one part of the story is that still raw and they're not ready, quite often we can shift it in a different angle or a different perspective of the story that they
Hmm.
are comfortable talking about or
Right,
putting into the story. And with all of my books right now too, a big focus is not just in the telling of our story, but then also having specific words of wisdom and tips and tools that the reader can now take with them to apply to their own life. So it becomes that inspiring story, as well as, well, what can I do myself
right,
to come through this too? So, really creating that, sharing our stories, but also really supporting the reader to take on some of these challenges as well.
right. So like this podcast, it's to show that there's hope.
Yeah.
So how did this help you transition from feeling like the martyr, feeling like the one who has to carry the world on her shoulders, to the healing and the confidence to know that you can say no, that you can make your own choices? How does this help you, and how did this change for you?
Yes, and I think being on the entrepreneurial journey definitely is a long string of lessons and experiences that we learn, and that's definitely helped me with the saying no and putting up, okay, this is what I can do, this is what I'm not going to do. So that's definitely helped me a lot there. I will not say that I am completely healed of my challenges of carrying everything on my shoulder. I guess I tend to do it more now with my family still, rather than in my work. And I think that's too one of the things I love about the books, is because what I'm doing is building a platform for others to stand on themselves. So I'm not the platform myself,
Right,
but I've created it for them.
right. You're
And so I
creating the
think that's
space.
exactly. So I think that's been part of it too, that I've taken myself out from under it and I'm presenting it for them to stand on. So I think that's part of it, that I've just shifted my where I'm standing in that picture. And definitely a huge part of this journey too, again, with the entrepreneurial piece, I've done a lot of listening to my intuition, following my gut, and really learning how to do that, and recognizing as well that a lot of these skills that I do have are very valuable in leadership. And then, looking more and really more deeply into what my skills are, and realizing that I am a leader and that I have a calling to be that one that stands up and says, okay, we're going to do this differently. I'm going this way. This is how I see things happening. If you like that, come on with me. So I think that's been part of it too, kind of recognizing my skills and stepping into them.
So I'm going to share a couple of coaching moments with you. Um,
Okay.
so one is You don't have to heal. There's no such thing as healing. And this has taken me years to understand. What you have is energy locked in, like, in a pattern, if you will, swirling. And that's your brain says, oh, I hit my knee. Let me get the folder out that says what happens when I hit my knee. I take out the folder, open up. Okay, when I hit my knee, this is how I'm supposed to react. And you react according to the history, right? And then that energy is stuck in there, right? And so it's learning to release the energy. And the way that you release the energy is sit with it and acknowledge that you feel that way. Don't ignore it. It's like a child having a temper tantrum. You want to put your arms around that child and love it, right? And so that's what you want to do. So you're not broken, please. You're not broken. And then there's a difference between skills and capabilities. Capabilities are innate. You were born with a gift, right? And that gift is different than someone else. Like, my gift is truth, and I'm a seer, right? And so I can see through the BS. Now, I'm not going to call people out on the BS, but I see through it. And a lot of people know that, and they're afraid of me. Right? Because I could, and no judgment. That's your story, not mine. I don't care. Right? But it's who I am. So how do I utilize that in my life? Because that's my capability. Skills are something you learn. I can learn to type, I can learn to write, I can learn to, do math and do, insurance, right? That's not a capability, right? And so skills, you can apply and learn any skill. We all have a brain, right? To where it is that you're going. But what you're doing has to feed your soul and support who you are. Like, I have had jobs where I am not allowed to speak my truth, I die. I wither away. It's so inappropriate for me. And so I don't know what your gift is, right? I would have to do a little work to figure that out. But it seems to me that part of what your gift is creating space for others. And we were raised to think that meant being a doormat. You're learning that you don't have to be a lot. That's probably going to be the title out from under it. You don't have to be underneath. You don't have to be Atlas holding up the world. You can actually create a little platform and put the world right there and just watch it spin, right? Right. And so that's a beautiful thing. So where do you see yourself going now in the next few years with the changes going on in your life, the types of things that you're doing? How do you see it morphing, or do you see it morphing?
Oh, definitely. Always evolving, always shifting. And one of the first things that I'm shifting, I'm starting to focus a lot more now on communities and creating book projects that represent that community and amplify that community. And one of the other things that I see in myself moving forward is stepping into a lot more of a speaking role, where I am not just supporting other people's messages and their stories, but then I'm also kind of amplifying that movement of women shifting how we're doing things, women stepping into possibilities. And my big focus is on midlife women, and that I find that so many are just stuck in where they are and feeling that they don't have choices, they don't have opportunities, that, our cultures kind of told us that, after your 50s and 60s, you should retire and pretty much crawl up into the corner and disappear, and I think so many of us, we're not looking for that path. That is not the opportunities that we see. That, in my mind, our 50s, 60s, 70s into our 80s is the time to be doing what excites and inspires us. So
It,
that's the big push of my work, is getting that whole message out there. That's, we're quite often, I find that people's immediate friends and family, the first response is to, oh, don't worry about that, calm down, don't do that, everything's fine, you'll get over it. And they don't give them that space or that permission to look at something different, something bigger.
I actually had a sister say to me, well, you don't look or act your age.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you.
and I looked down and I said, well, what is that supposed to look like? Right? And she said, well, like you wear shorts, like short shorts. Um, I said, until my legs sag. Yeah. Right? Why would that's one of my major assets, right? Why wouldn't I do that in the summertime? Yes, I'm going to walk around in shorts. And it didn't occur to me until after she said that, and I started thinking about people that I know around my age, even in the heat of the summer, are wearing jeans or
Nice.
right,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
or slacks, and I'm like, oh, wow. Right? And so act however you want to act.
Mm.
Anything else is a story,
Yes.
right?
And I think too, the more that we keep ourselves active and social and learning and expanding, that's what keeps us young. Like our brains need to be learning new things and meeting new people and going new places, and that keeps us young.
Well, that's exciting. That's what makes life what I call delicious. So Cathy, if people wanted to know more about what you do and wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
The easiest way is through my website. So it's inspiredtenacity.com. And that's got links to all of my book projects and everything else that I've been up to. LinkedIn is my most common social media. So if you're looking for me on social media, I'm on a few other places, but not as active. So LinkedIn is where you'll find me most often. And yeah, and one of the things I offer as well is a complimentary chat. So we just jump on a Zoom, talk about what your goals are, if you'd like to be in books, what that might look like. And so yeah, very easy to
Awesome.
find.
And she's so easy to work with, I'm telling you. Okay, so thank you so much, Cathy. And all of that information will be in the show notes so people can go and grab it. And this is Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. If there's something in here that inspired you, or if you have a question, do leave some notes. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it. If you know someone who could benefit from this, absolutely share it out to them, and always be sure to subscribe so that you know when the next episode is coming up. This is Gail Kraft saying goodbye, and thank you so much, Cathy, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.